Each episode of the Blind Alchemy Podcast is designed to be helpful. Expect comedy. Do not expect consistency or sense to be made. I am Podbot. I was inspired by the Lion Goat podcast. Listen to that show. Today's episode continues the interview with philosopher Buck Johnson and the discussion of the fourth hermetical principle of polarity.
Supposed to talk now, Ted? I don't know what's going on, Ted. We've never had the intro at the beginning of the show before. I know you're still trying to use stuff. I'm proud of you. I'm not sure.
Hello and welcome to the Blind Alchemy Podcast. I am your host, the Blind Alchemist, and I am coming at you live from the kitchen with this rendition of reality as we know it. We are all one, and there is nothing new under the sun that shines down here upon the island of mind, which is somewhere adrift in the sea of frequency that creates all of reality. You see, we are connected through this energy. Now, I would like to thank you for joining us today.
Today with us is our guest, Buck Johnson. That's his name.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you for joining us again, Buck.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going well.
Oh, wait.
What?
What were you saying?
Who?
I was just saying
Ted, there's no dragon in here.
Dragon?
Okay, Ted.
What?
No, I'm sorry. My sound engineer is high on drugs again. After his brief stint in rehab, apparently he was there 5 hours.
Are you talking about Ted?
Oh yeah, Ted. He's a pain in the ass. He's a good guy, mostly.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's hard to find good help these days.
It truly is, Buck. Thank you for stating the obvious.
As you know, that is my specialty.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad I could help out. Anyway, I'm happy to be here anytime you want to talk about these. I tell you, I went up to visit the lion goat. He's got me up here at the ranch. And
oh, yeah. How is old Anonymous?
Oh, Mr. Anonymous? Yeah, you know, he's...
unusual?
He's always a little bit crazy. I'll be honest with you, that guy kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go into more detail, I'd be happy to go into a little bit more detail.
No. Boring. I appreciate your gusto, boss. Today, we'll continue discussing the 7 hermetic principles. Number 4, the principle of polarity.
Oh yeah, polarity. I was actually going to prepare a little bit for this episode. Let me make sure I've got my hermetic principles list brought up.
Patricia, remind me to tell you, write this down on a Post-it note, stick it to your desk. Make sure the guests are prepared. Thank you. All right. And yeah, you're right. The host should be prepared too, but it's my show. I am the show, bitch. Shut up. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to have to lay down the law on air.
That was intense. Do you often refer to her that way? I mean...
No, just this one time.
Well, I don't know how I feel about that. It kind of made me feel a little...
Well, I use a backhand slap to keep my hose in line, if you know what I mean.
No, that doesn't sound good at all.
You don't have any hose?
No.
Well, thankfully, the fine folks over at Hairline Production can just edit this shit out. Those guys are great, I promise. I recommend them for anybody starting a podcast or anybody laying down tracks, beats, whatever, drum, bass. They're badass over there.
Well, this is your podcast. Maybe you should do it.
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Okay.
Well, during my preparation, I came across lots of stuff about the principle.
Oh, fantastic.
Tons. It is all very scientific.
That's great. Perhaps we should just do a little summary.
We're going to read the principle and get everybody on the same page.
Oh, okay.
Let's continue. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and dislike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The kybalion, quote unquote. See, pretty simple one, I feel like. I mean, if you don't get everything's got a opposite, you probably should just...
It does represent something of a philosophical challenge. I mean, if you think about it, when you look at duality and polarity, I feel like this is one of those things that it's one of the limitations of the philosophies of man. And if you look at the history of mankind and all of the great theoretical philosophies and theological philosophies, and there is this duality. We say things are good or evil, or we say things are light or dark. But I find that that sort of comparison, it seems a bit reductionist if you think about it, because there's more of a layer of complexity. I think as we go farther along, this sort of philosophy of there's a duality to everything. It's changing, don't you think, to a more nuanced approach, thinking of things as being on a spectrum rather than things being a duality.
Well, see, the duality is the opposing ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
The best example I can give is temperature. All right, hot and cold are the opposing ends of the spectrum that temperature exists on. And then where does hot begin and cold end is really the more philosophical part of the questioning, I think.
Yeah, but it says that opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. And I find that if things are identical in nature, I don't know if it's that clear that cold is identical in nature with hot, if we take your example of temperature, for example.
It's temperature. You know what I mean? I think that's what it means.
So because they're on the same measuring stick.
They're identical. They're on the same, yeah.
Yeah, but it says like and unlike are the same. So let's see if we can think of some examples that where this breaks down. So is there an opposite to, say, the mind, if we take the principle of the mind is all? Is there an opposite to the all? Is nothing the opposite of the all? I've never thought of nothing as the opposite of the all, or nothing being on the same spectrum as the all, because nothing is literally the absence of something. And for the absence of something to exist, this breaks down this principle that everything has a duality.
I feel stumped. Is that a paradox that can't be reconciled? What do you think, folks? Please, send us letters, telegrams, faxes. Nobody uses that anymore, so don't fax us. We don't have a fax machine. But, you could email us over here at the Blind Alchemy Podcast at gmail.com with your questions, comments, and whatever else you'd like. Please, no nudes. That's a good question. Is nothing the opposite of something or everything?
I don't think that nothing is the opposite of everything. I think that nothing is a different type of measurement. I mean, there are some philosophers that say that nothing doesn't exist, like that you can't actually measure nothingness. And I wonder how the great philosophers of the Hermetic principles would approach that question. I don't remember any other mention of the nothing or the absence of things in the Kybalion. Are you familiar with any reference to nothing?
No, I don't recall it even talking about the subject of nothing. It's been a minute since I've read it.
Are there other approaches to that in Hermeticism? I mean, they begin in showing that the spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree, of mental manifestation. Thus, the law and laws are the two opposite poles of one thing. Likewise, principle and principles, infinite mind and finite mind. So, as we read more in the Kybalion, it doesn't talk about nothing. It does talk about light and darkness, like you said, the good and the bad, and it talks about love and hate being opposites of poles. But I don't remember any mention of the nothing, and that is the only thing that I'll bring up that sort of stands in opposition to this concept. But other than that, I would agree with you that all things, if we take the analogy of the spectrum, all things are on the spectrum, and that there are different degrees of those things, then I think that's the only place where it really breaks down, other than the nothing, is that perhaps it lacks some nuance. I wonder if the spiritual plane or the multi-dimensional view of the universe or the multi-dimensional view of time implies that there can be more than two different poles on the spectrum of any particular spectrum. If time is not linear, or if time indeed exists, or if there's multi-dimensions in these planes of the spirit, or on different dimensions than the dimension in which we live, then there could possibly be more than two poles, right? One set of poles for each dimension.
Would each layer have its own set of operating rules and poles itself? These are all good questions. We don't have any answers. I think that's what the point of this show is. We just try to find questions, because if you try to find an answer, you're just going to run into more questions. Am I right? I think so.
I think that's true in science, and I think that's true in philosophy and theology. They do kind of have a sort of like get out of jail free card where they write all truths are but half truths within the same thing that they're saying. This is a definite thing. Everything is dual, except everything that we say is not everything. It's all half truth. What do you think about that? All truths are but half truths. How do you feel about that?
I don't think anybody can ever fully comprehend what the absolute truth is. I think it's beyond human comprehension, because it's kind of like putting God in a basket. That's kind of what modern religion does. It's like, this is what God is because this is what we tell you God is, and we're right, everybody else is wrong, and each religion does it. So who knows? The true truth is probably a smush of them all together, and
a blend.
Yes, I'm babbling, Ted. I realize. Thank you for pointing that out. I apologize, folks. Ted's on his game today. Asshole.
I like this point, Joe, you're making, though. Let's talk more about putting God in a basket. Tell me more about this idea. Like, are you saying that regardless of religion, or regardless of creed, or regardless of approach, we were placing limits upon our deities as we look through these different theologies?
I think so. I think it's more like God made man, and then man made God, or made an idea of what God should be, and then wrapped religion all around it and packaged it up in whatever great old book and dogma, or theology, whatever, and just passes it out and say, this is right, this is that one over there that guy's got is wrong, so don't listen to him. When it's more like they're all kind of true, because they're all saying the same stuff from a different perspective, I guess, a different aspect.
You're saying they're all half-truths?
Yeah. I've made this analogy before. I don't know if I've made it on the show or not, but religion is kind of like this. You have a pencil. You have an end you write with, and that little rubber thing on the other end is called a what?
Eraser?
No, it's called a gum.
A gum, okay. An eraser, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
same thing, right?
Well, yeah, it is, but you can argue with that somebody will tell you, no, that's an eraser all day long, when Gom means eraser in another language. And I kind of think that's what religion has done. It's just like one language to look at this whole big picture, and things will change meaning, or they'll sound like they mean something different because it's in a different fucking language. I actually think that like the Hindu religion, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that religion.
True.
With all the gods, and I think it captures the God function, generate, order, destroy function of God and creation. God creates forms, orders those forms, destroys those forms in order to create more forms.
Is that the origin of the word God?
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors.
Your product goes here. Anything and everything good to say about your product, we'll say it right here, right now.
Tell them the alchemist sent you.
And now, back to the show.
Is that the origin of the word God?
I don't know where the word comes from, but they use it as that. A lot of things I've read or listened to.
I don't know that I've heard that before. That's interesting. I like that. If we say that these different religions are wrapping God in a basket, or putting limits on God, or trying to define God, which I think you're right about that. I think that all dogmas, theologies, I think that's sort of the attempt of these things, is how do we represent this information in a way, a nice, neat package that we can spread out to the masses so that they can understand the principles that we're trying to put forth. I think that the hermetic principles, in essence, are doing the same thing, trying to wrap these concepts in a nice little basket. And that's sort of the point that I was making on one of the earlier episodes, that I thought about the math that they use, like the seven principles, the 7 planes, the 7 subplanes of the 7 planes, all of those sort of number things I find to be a bit neat and tidy. And I think it comes from that same basis. Like, if you can effectively communicate something by wrapping it in a nice language, or wrapping it in a nice presentation, putting it in ordered pairs, it's sort of like this principle of polarity. That's the point I was making at the beginning, where it says everything is dual. I think that's, in principle, it's trying to say that there is multiple ways that you can look at everything, but that things exist in a spectrum. And you said it's the same as saying the poles of the spectrum is the same as saying that everything's dual. But I don't know. I've found myself more in my life lately trying to see things without that simple duality. Like, when I was young, when I was like a sophomore in college, and I like to write poetry, I would often use ideas in my poetry that contrasted with each other. And I think that's a very sophomoric way of thinking about things. You often think about, if it's not black, it's white, that sort of thing. It's not good, it's bad. Right. I think that's a sort of sophomoric way to approach philosophy and poetry. But as you get older and wiser, or maybe farther away from wisdom, depending on if you're looking at things from a Western point of view or an Eastern point of view, as you get more knowledge, or what we might call wisdom in Western culture, you begin to see that things are not so easily defined. Or if you study more science, the more you learn about a subject, you find the more questions you have, or the less that you actually might know. And I wonder if maybe it's just, like you said, maybe they're just trying to wrap these 7 hermetical principles into a nice little basket so that they can be easily consumed, and that's why they say everything's dual. But I don't know. It says extremes meet, which to me presents this concept that on either end of the spectrum, those two things come back together like a circle. Don't you think, when it says extremes meet? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like the idea of direction. If you go in one direction on a spherical planet, eventually you come back to the point that you started, if you stay on that same plane, if you can. If you believe in like the sort of concepts of geometry that involve spheres. And do you think that it works that way on these on the spiritual plane, or on if you go so far to the smallest vibration, do you eventually get back to the fastest vibration possible? We were talking about the principle of vibration last week, and we never did approach that idea of, like, if you go infinitely slow, at some point do you get back to infinitely fast?
Is infinitely slow and infinitely fast the same?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, do the extremes meet there with vibration?
I don't know. That's over my head. I'm not gonna lie. That's above my pay grade. You'll get that on the big jobs, they tell me, but that especially, that's for a smarter guy than the old alchemist here. But maybe one day we'll understand. And I see. What's I going to say? You were talking about everything being put in that basket, which everything seems to have two types of information. And I'm going to use some big words here. Watch out, Ted. Esoteric and exoteric. That's the two classes of information that everything has. Esoteric is stuff very few people know. That's for the guys that run the show, I guess. And exoteric is for the general populace. That's what everybody knows. And that is true with religion, apparently, with all of them, as best as I can figure in my diggings. And it may be true with science as well. I mean, because we don't get told everything. The guys outside doing the farming and pilgrimage and building stuff in the factories, we don't get told stuff, because that's need to know. You don't need to know that, because if you get smarter than us, or get even as smart as the guys running the show, there's a problem, because they don't want you as smart as them. They want to be able to control you, and that is an aspect of government and reality everywhere, as far as I can tell. Is they're trying to control us. They're trying to guide us and direct us in a direction that we may not want to go. And how do you stop that? How do you steer a ship of billions of collective minds all pulling in? Because most people know what the fuck they're doing day to day. They sure as hell don't know what's going on in the world or in nature on a spiritual level. Most people don't even believe there's a fucking spiritual plane. This is a material place. I got my money, I got my food, I got my beers, I got my hose, I'm set. And we don't even care about where the soul goes when we die. We're just worm food anyway, fuck them. But I actually think that the spiritual plane is the only plane that really matters, because we have to figure out how to operate from that place of pure unity and love to walk around down here just like I think that's what Jesus did, to be honest, is that he was in that plane mentally all the time as he walked around down here. And I may be rambling again. Am I rambling, Ted?
I don't think you're rambling. I think you're making some good points. I like this point about exoteric versus esoteric. And that's exactly the thing I was saying before, this sort of nice package, or the basket, if you will, of the way the principles are presented. They're sort of presented in this exoteric fashion, but it does state throughout the kybalion, things like the devout student, or the student who's familiar with the various schools of mental science. Maybe that's where it's talking about the more esoteric teachings, or the more esoteric learnings, which develop with the more study that you have, and the more that you try to look for the spiritual plane, or you try to elevate your vibration, you try to find things outside the physical plane. I think that it's a common approach to think that the spiritual plane may be the only thing that matters in a religious sense. Like if you look at a religion like Hindu, or some call it a religion, the philosophy of Buddhism, the state of trying to reach a higher plane, or the status of trying to reach a place in nirvana on earth, then they might say that this higher plane is the only thing that matters. I think in Buddhism it's a little bit different, because you try to achieve that higher plane here on Earth in your everyday waking life. And I tend to stray towards that side of things. Yet again, I mean, I would agree with you. Your sort of spiritual happiness is more important than the day-to-day sort of physical happiness, because I think there's always going to be suffering.
Right, right. All this daily running around here and there, paying the electric bill, going to work, oh, that's a distraction from that itself. And if you're not focused on that, you're going to get completely lost. You're going to get swallowed up, fed to the wolves, like a lamb to the slaughter.
Well, granted, much of that, it's all created for our own amusement and entertainment, or sort of like this sort of game that we play with our mind. That I think much of the human endeavor in the modern world is humans playing a game to pretend that something different than what is actually real is happening. I think that's why we're facing things like this great global ecological crisis that some people say is bullshit, but some people say it's just the next ice age and it was bound to happen anyways.
Well,
but
right. Well, you gotta look at this. Well, let me say this: the people telling you that you have to lessen your carbon footprint and go green are the same people with like 8 houses, 35 cars, and private planes. They don't care about the planet. They care about taking what you want from it.
No, I disagree. I think the people that have been saying that since the 1940s,
right?
Because the scientists have been saying this since the 1940s. Well, this is nothing new.
There is a polar shift that occurs every, I don't know how many billion years, but it does happen. The North Pole becomes the South Pole, and it happens.
Well, there's shifts of climate that happen more often than that. I think the last one was like something like 50,000 years ago. And I don't think that we're looking at that type of occurrence in this particular case. I think what the scientists are all upset about is the fact that we've shifted the global pace. So there's a global pace of, like you're saying, there's this global pace of climate change, or global pace of some type of polarity shift. I think a polarity shift would have more to do with magnetism, which would have a great effect on climate. But the thing that they're all concerned about is the degree of greenhouse gas collection in the atmosphere and how that will affect the global temperature scale. Because the thing that makes the Earth such a hospitable place for humans, if you sort of look at the history of the temperature of the Earth, and we'll get back to polarity in just a second.
All right, fine.
The history of the temperature of the Earth, the thing that makes it so nice for humans is that temperature falls within really this sort of 5 degrees Celsius scale. And it's been that way for the history of all of the mammals on the planet that we currently know. And if it changes outside that range, it becomes less hospitable for all of the animals that currently live on the Earth to survive in the way that they survive now. Not saying that they wouldn't be able to, and humans wouldn't be able to come up with some sort of spacesuit that they could live in if it was outside that temperature range. But the animals that live today because of that specific temperature range. And that's why when the dinosaurs were on the planet, that temperature range was different. And at that temperature range, the dinosaurs they seem to be, by all practical accounts and all the bones that we can find currently, to be the ones that were the best at surviving at those temperatures. And so the scary thing is if it gets out of that temperature range by 2 degrees, then that will change all of the animals that have currently evolved to survive in this temperature range. And that's the thing that everyone's so afraid of. It's a very small scale, and it does take a shit ton of carbon to change that scale. But the fact that we produce carbon at a rate now that's unprecedented in the history of all time, as far as we know, it's really pretty unbelievable. Like if you think about it, you can sort of think about it like a balloon. If you put 3 marbles in a balloon and you bounce the balloon up and down, it's going to bounce a certain amount, right? But if you put 20 marbles in the balloon, it's going to bounce at a much different rate. And that's the thing. Like, we produce like a new marble every 10 years now. Whereas before, when the population of the Earth was a quarter of the population of the human population of the Earth is now, we would only produce a marble like once every 1,000 years. So that scale has changed so greatly. That's what everybody's freaking out about. And I mean, I'm sad to say, from my perspective, we're way too fucking late to do a goddamn thing about it. It's way too late. We had to start 100 years ago to do anything about it.
I don't believe it. I don't think so. But I don't think going to electric cars is going to make that big of a deal, because you're still going to have all this mining, which is, destroying. You're still going to have to mine the cobalt and the copper and the lithium, all that. You're still going to have to mine for that. You're still going to be doing what you're doing now on the same scale. That's not changing.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors.
Your product goes here. Anything and everything good to say about your product, we'll say it right here, right now.
And now, back to the show.
I agree with you. I think that it has to be a much greater approach than that. We need to have electric cars and use solar power. And the real solution is, no, we need to kill half of the human population and only use wood as tools.
No.
Ever again. Fuck everything that we have in our current technology. We have to get rid of all of it. We have to go back to before the Industrial Revolution. That's the only way.
We do need to get in better sync with nature itself in a harmonious way.
Yeah, or come up with a technology that follows the principles of giving back to the ecology everything you take out of the ecology in the same quantities that were there originally, which is how everything else lives. Trees don't consume all the carbon dioxide to the point that there's no more carbon dioxide and the earth dies. They use exactly the amount they need to use to put enough water into the clouds to make more water for their roots to soak up and repeat the cycle. But we've broken the cycle. We're not playing in the cycle rules. And that's, it doesn't have to mean the end of technology. It just means that it has to be the end of our current, everything we do. It's not just, it's the way we collect and consume our food. It's the way that we create the energy that we use to heat and cool our homes. And this doesn't even bring up the nightmare of plastic. Plastics are such a big problem. The fact that every single thing that every human in a non-third world country survives on, they get everything in individualized packages. And I'm getting way off our topic of discussion today.
Yeah, we're way down.
Let's talk about polarity. The extreme polarity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have abandoned the topic of polarity today, and we're going on this crusade, on this green crusade.
I'll get off my soapbox. My theory on this is just everything that we consume is in plastics. We have to get rid of all of that.
Well, maybe the planet Earth made us to make plastic because it couldn't make it itself. You don't know what the planet Earth wants. You can't, don't speak for Mother Earth.
Well, that's the irony, right? It's not like we're creating something brand new that shouldn't exist here. The plastic already exists. We just create it in a form. It's just too good. When they came up with plastics in the first place, the problem that they were trying to solve is, how do I make something that lasts longer than wood and doesn't get eaten by termites in 20 years so that I have to rebuild it again? That was the problem they were trying to solve. And they solved that problem by making this amazing thing that'll last for 300 years. But you can't put everybody's individual snacks in that every single day for 8 billion people, because then you got 8 billion things that'll last 300 years. So just come up with something that...
Right. We probably need a better way of disposing with plastics. Maybe that's a better. I saw a Bic pen commercial, not to name names. It was Our pens are 50% recycled material. They're like 50%, that's not enough. I mean, you can make a whole pen out of some recycled bottles, surely to God. Why is it only 50%? It's doing a half-assed job, I feel like.
Here's the problem with plastics recycling. It takes more resources to recycle any piece of plastic than it does to create the plastic in the first place.
Damn it. So what you're saying, recycling is just a waste of time. My 8th grade science teacher was full of shit.
It's like good in principle. It's just like plastics. It's a great principle, but the way that we do things, it's so ass backwards. It's just the worst possible way we could ever do it. Mm-hmm. It's going to take up an oven that requires a ton of coal to heat up the plastics, to melt the plastics, and 50 gallons of water to make a single plastic bottle. Oh, good. Well, that's a good solution. No, you can't recycle a single plastic bottle and take twice the resources it took to make it in the first place. So that's the problem. I think the solution there will eventually be some sort of bacteria that breaks down all the plastics, but we'll have to sort of find that, engineer it. Those things already do exist on the planet, but we haven't found a good way to use them. But sorry, getting back to your point.
I will say, while we're on the topic of climate change and all that, what's going to do more damage? Your car's exhaust or firing nuclear weapons into the atmosphere? Because we did that in the 50s, just a shitload of them, just okay. And then you add on to this, conspiracy theorists will say chemtrails. Geoengineering. That's what your government calls what chemtrails are. Chemtrails are a way to geoengineer. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact, if you will. Meddling with what we're meddling with, that's causing more damage. I agree. We're probably producing way too much carbon in the first place. But trying to control the weather and the atmosphere and stuff, that's also fucking it up.
Yeah.
Okay, now back to the topic of polarity.
I think you're right to address that point. I think that's one thing that we'll find, sort of like this idea of all truths are half truths. There's this concept of like all measures are half measures when it comes to geoengineering or trying to fix the species of the planet or regulate the amount of game. And there's many things that humans do that are ridiculous. And, they sort of talk about this concept in the kybalion of the two poles may be classified as positive and negative when you're talking about the physical to the mental plane. They say that love is a positive to hate, courage is a positive to fear, activity is a positive to non-activity. That can get a bit tricky if you think about this from the perspective of activity, but it says that the sort of goal of the tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. So I think that they're trying to say that nature presents to us a solution which is positive or a solution which is on a higher plane. So then you sort of face this paradox of, well, is everything that humans do natural? Because we're a part of nature.
Right.
So are all the choices that we make and the ideas that we come up with, the philosophies and, even the creation of plastics or the ideas of this geoengineering and chemtrails and conspiracies and all the things that we come up, are those all natural because they all come from humans? Are we looking on this from the principle of maybe humans are somehow different than other things that are natural or the things that we come up with?
What?
I was just looking to see if you had a response to that idea of like, are all the things that humans do, should they be considered natural because we're of nature?
Probably not. We are of nature. We are just another mammal on the planet Earth. We actually think we're above the food chain. We're just part of it because we have brain and the ability to speak. And for some reason, that makes everybody think they're smarter than everything else. And that's really not the case. I think that's mankind's problem, is we're not as smart as we think we are.
I agree. I don't think we're as smart as we think we are. And I think this tradition of man's hierarchy over the planet, I think a lot of that was introduced at the time of the Judaic religions and when they became the most widespread religions on certain parts of the planet. And I think it's a very sort of Western idea, but I don't think all religions have that principle. I think there's many different older peoples or more naturalistic philosophies. I struggle when I don't want to say the word old or primitive or anything like that, because these things still exist today and they're as evolved as any other thought.
Right. Well, There's a tribe, I think there's a tribe of people in the Amazon, and I forget their names. They use zero technology except for one thing, GPS, to map their territory. And if you cross into their territory, you're fucked. They'll kill you right there. That's all the technology. They just live off the land the way they have done for thousands of years, except for GPS perimeter mapping. That's it.
I wonder what their opinion of the hierarchy of man is, and if they believe that man has dominion over all the other species or the other animals. I doubt that they would, because I think that many hunter-gatherer cultures don't have that principle. They have a principle of being a part of the earth, or being in harmony, this idea of harmony with all things. And I think that's sort of the point that this principle of polarity is trying to make when it says that all things natural are on the positive pole. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think that it's like the idea of vibration, the idea of polarity. You want to be in harmony with all these different things.
Hold on, well, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's look up the word dominion. Sovereignty or control. Man's attempts to establish dominion over nature, territory, or sovereign government. I didn't really clear anything up there. How do you use the word you're trying to define in a definition? Let's look up the etymology, so that way we find out what it really means. It comes from Middle English via Old French, from medieval Latin domino, from dominium, dominius, means lord or master.
Do you feel like in the principles of Hermeticism, I don't know that it mentions a lord or master. We brought up before that it doesn't really seem to mention a deity in a way. So I'm curious what your thought is of the idea of dominion. I mean, is there a concept of dominion within the Hermetic principles? Maybe the dominion over becoming more mentally attuned or on a higher plane, dominion over one's own self or one's personal.
Yeah, I think that really boils down to dominion over mastering oneself. I think that's because nobody even tries that shit anymore. There's very few people that even care what their actions affect. You are the only thing you can control. That and the radio. You can't really control the radio. You just have to change stations. So you have to control your reaction to everything. You have to dominate your emotions. You have to dominate your mental processes, which entails changing your subconscious programming, because you don't even know how you're programmed a lot of times. So you've got to do a lot of, I think it's called shadow work. I think that's what Carl Jung said. Shadow work is digging around in your subconscious and changing what needs to be changed and facing all the things you're afraid to face, because what you're afraid of eventually becomes a limitation, and you won't ever go over there. Like, nah, I'm not going to do that, because that's the stuff I'm afraid of. I'm going to stay over here where I'm comfortable and safe. But if you do face it, you become comfortable and safe over there too. So you've mastered that. You master you, and you.
I don't know. We sort of have this idea in our Western perspective, in the capitalist mindset of needing to constantly improve or needing to move forward, needing to better oneself. And I think that principle is older than capitalism. I think that that's common to many cultures of man, this idea of needing to better oneself. But I don't know if that's the only path to enlightenment. If you look at principles of meditation, they sort of focus on the idea of giving into the current situation, whatever that situation might be, to find that enlightenment, accepting the presence or the state of things as they are, learning to listen rather than speaking as loud as you can or thinking as loud as you can to reach those higher states.
Right, exactly. Submission, is it? No, that's not the word I'm looking for.
Non-resistance, maybe.
No, Ted, why would the word be that word? Where are you? Shut up, Ted.
That's very talkative today. More talkative than he was last week.
Yeah, I think, whatever concoction of drugs he's on today.
Oh no, did he get back into the cocaine again?
Who knows when he's on? I don't think he's seeing dragons on cocaine, do you? But I don't know, Ted. I don't care what you stuffed up your butt. Just, I hope it's not any of the office equipment. We're gonna need a new stapler. Patricia, get us a new stapler.
That could be dangerous. Make sure he doesn't squeeze too tight when he sits down.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than having your colon stapled to itself.
Yeah, I'm probably. Yeah, go to the doctor and have your colon checked for holes. Thank you, Ted.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors.
Your product goes here. Anything and everything good to say about your product, we'll say it right here, right now. Promo code
Oncologist.
And now, back to the show.
I'm sorry. Let's get back on topic here. We were talking about the principle of polarity, which was probably hours ago. Now we've lost our point. We've lost our direction, folks. But that happens when you're sailing the seas of frequency. It's easy to get confused because, what the hell's a frequency?
Well, we talked about the duality of things, the polarity of things, the spectrum of things, like and unlike opposites. We talked about how the extremes might meet. I think that's still another idea that we can think more about because I'm not sure what that means, extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths.
Well, they kind of meet in the middle. That's the way I was thinking about it.
Rather than at the polar ends, they meet in the middle. I see.
Right.
So for every spectrum, there is some midline that can be...
Like a comfort zone.
I see. Okay, or a DMZ, if you will.
Of perfect harmonic resonance.
All paradoxes may be reconciled, however, is something that we didn't discuss. So let's talk about that. How polarity creates the state that all paradoxes may be reconciled. Do you agree with that? Or have you found that in your studies of enlightenment that all paradoxes may be reconciled? Because this is one I desperately need, Blind Alchemist. I'm going to need you to be my therapist, be my guide, be my teacher.
Okay.
Lead me somewhere where all paradoxes may be reconciled, because I struggle with this on a microsecond basis. All paradoxes are not reconciled.
Maybe there are no paradoxes because our limited understanding creates a paradox where there isn't one.
So like perhaps all of the paradoxes that we believe in as mankind, all of the games that we play in our mind, all of the paradoxes that we create for ourselves through our limited ability to observe the universe and all its complexity, our dualistic view creates all of these paradoxes, but none of those truly exist.
Right. We can't see everything that is. We only see what we can see and understand only a smaller portion of what we can see. But we don't see the all or the is, which is probably a much cooler way to call it, because it just is. Everything that is just is. And we don't see or understand but a small portion of what is.
So does this mean that our desperate struggle to understand is possibly the first place that we're going wrong?
Maybe.
Should we just not attempt to understand? Should we throw out the book of the 7 hermetic principles and disregard all of these philosophical endeavors and just say to ourselves whenever the questions come into our minds, don't ask that question, just accept?
No, we can't live in ignorance, right? Because ignorance is a state of fear, or will lead to a state of fear.
Or a state of bliss, some might say, or the ultimate state of wisdom, right?
Yeah. Not caring may be the ultimate state of wisdom. Okay, that is exploding now. Okay, that's fine. It'll work itself out. But I don't know. We do have a limited understanding of everything. Most humans don't even attempt to apply logic because we're emotionally programmed. And speaking for myself, I have relied entirely too much on emotion because a lack of understanding of what they were, how they affected me, or how even to use them correctly. Or better yet, a poor understanding of what they are.
Do you believe that you have control over your emotions?
Maybe. Like me personally, or everybody can control their emotions? Yeah.
Both. Individually. Let's talk about both of these points. I mean, I'm curious.
I think the point is to acknowledge the emotion and not get wrapped up in it, because it will take control of you. The Irish say, I'm not even going to attempt to speak Gaelic, but the expression is, the sadness is upon me again, instead of I am sad like they say in the States. The identifying with the whole, that I am sad, I am the sadness, They just say that, oh, I'm feeling that again. It's here. I acknowledge it. Bye-bye. I can deal with it. Once you name it, acknowledge it, you can deal with it better. In my personal life, I can do that with most emotions 99% of the time. The only one I can't do it with is anger, because it gets on me so fucking fast. It's like, whew, I done broke something before I realize I'm mad.
Anger is a tricky one. And, most psychologists would say that anger derives from a point of fear. All of the anger that you experience is really a manifestation of fear. And people tend to call anger something different. And I would agree with that to some point. I think that it's fear and pain. I think it's fear of pain. Anger is a manifestation of a reaction to a fear of pain. It's our way of trying to avoid some sort of future pain that we foresee coming. And I don't know what you think about that, but I think that in my own life, I used to struggle with anger quite a bit. I don't think that I do that as much anymore. I've limited the humans that I interact with that cause me anger, however, to such a degree that I avoid that anger. But I think when I'm presented with anger these days, it's much less than it used to be. And that, I think, came from when I first sort of decided to look at anger as a type of fear, or a type of fear of something in the future, or a type of anxiety. Because once I saw it that way, I could say, oh, okay, well, there's general states of fear that I experience for various things throughout the day that don't cause me to be angry. I can step back and realize that my reaction to anger is typically because of some story that I'm telling myself about the event that's making me angry. Mm-hmm. And if I step back and I say to myself, oh, look, there is Buck Johnson. Buck Johnson is getting angry about this thing. Isn't that interesting? Then it takes me out of that anger, because I can see it as a thing that's occurring in the story that is the story that Buck Johnson tells himself about Buck Johnson's experience of the world. And maybe if you can take that third person perspective, that can help you in those moments when you're feeling angry, even if it comes on so fast, like your fuse has been lit and you're about to explode. If you say to yourself, look at the Blind Alchemist, he's angry about this thing. That's a story that he's telling himself. Or it's harder, but
yeah, I find that naming it...
At some point, I can ask myself the question, what is it that I'm afraid of?
Oh, that's a good question. But I find that naming it takes the wind out of it, so it doesn't hit as hard.
Exactly.
Maybe. You're like, oh, well, I am kind of angry now, so I'm going to go over here and calm the fuck down before I smash your face in with this hammer. Because you don't really want to do that. That leads you to jail.
Well, it always leads to some bigger problem. I mean, that was my experience. Everything I was ever really mad at, and every reaction I had to that anger that wasn't a reaction that was just finding a way to calm down, always led to something that was bad. Right. It never led to something good. No. I wonder if, I think that's been the history of man. I like this idea of discussing this idea of the feeling exists. Some people think of their feelings as they have some sort of third person locus of control. Like the feeling comes from somewhere else. Like you were saying, I have the sadness again, or you can expand that to this principle of sort of like the state of the mental is the all, or the I am, or the God, or the intellect of the universe is the intellect that is the intellect, which is a part of my intellect, which is the intellect that we all share. Some people think of their emotions that way, like this is the anger has come to me again, the anger is taken over, or maybe it's not the feeling of anger, maybe it's sadness or joy or whatever it is. I think that sort of allows you to get away with not being responsible for your emotions. Mm-hmm. But you have to be responsible for your emotions, because you're the only person who's responsible for your emotions. You're the only person who can change those emotions. You're the only person that can control those emotions. You're the only person who can define what those emotions are.
And for sometimes that's the hardest thing. What am I feeling?
Yeah.
What is this? Because for the longest time, I think I was stuck there, not knowing how to define things. Once I learned how to define those things and the coping tools that you use to deal with them, I became better. My life became better. It's like when I was an alcoholic, because the Blind Alchemist was an alcoholic, folks. I mean, that's just facts. I used it to deal with everything. Like, sadness, glug, glug, glug. Anger, glug, glug, glug. Try to get away from these emotions instead of accepting them, acknowledging them, and coping. Because if you don't deal with life on life's terms, you're not really dealing with anything at all. You're just making the situation worse in the long run, or yourself worse in the long run.
So you used this as a tool to avoid the emotions, and you were making a point about how that's changed. How has that changed now?
Well, I think acceptance is a big part of it. It's a very hard thing to put into words. I apologize. Because I don't know what changed in me. I think there was I personally was dealing with a lot of guilt and shame, and I drank to hide from that. But once I learned how to process that better, I don't feel that guilt or that shame anymore. Those things happened. Well, they did. I was not totally responsible for 90% of what I thought I was responsible for. I felt like it was all my fault, but it wasn't. It happened to me, not because something I did. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I am not the event. So why identify with the event? I don't have the psychological vocabulary to explain these things, right?
Well, you were saying that once you became able to step back and describe or define those feelings, then, well, you were saying this about anger, that once you could step back and define that feeling, then that helps you to be in control of that or not let that control you. I imagine it's probably the same way with these other ideas of guilt or shame, but you tell me. I don't know if that's the way it was for you.
I remember I had to go to rehab. It was a court-ordered rehab, and I had to go, and I went, and I did this therapy-wise. There was like I can't remember the name of it. It was an REM processing thing. It's your brain naturally processes things, the events of the day, in an REM state. And if you don't get into that state or stay in that state long enough, you...
This therapy, was it electromagnetic resonance or something like that?
Yeah, it's something. I can't remember what it was called. It was 7 years ago now. Anyway, you held these little things that vibrated, and you had this earphones on, and it'd make these sounds, and then the things would vibrate in the right and then left and right, left and right. Mm-hmm. It'd sync your brain in an REM frequency state, that is, or beta, delta, whatever. And I had to make a trauma list, is what they called it. So it brought up these traumas so I could view it. It was like watching, for me personally, it was like watching an old 8mm home movie that, we watched as kids.
I see.
If you're younger than 30, you don't understand what that means. But, because everything's digital now. But other people were like, hey, this thing was like HD sharp for me, and it was like being there, and it was experiencing all again. But I remember after I did that, and I was sitting in the little group therapy, and I had to talk about it, I physically braced for the impact of the guilt and the shame.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, fuck, it didn't come. I didn't get hit, It was very freeing not to be, wow, it doesn't affect me now. So it was, it was nice. And I remember after I came out of that therapy, there was like 2 flights of stairs or some shit. It was, 2-story building where I came down the stairs, and I put my feet on the ground in the parking lot, and my whole spine just went crack.
Wow.
Like all the weight of all that shit was gone.
That's amazing.
It physically released itself from my pelvis all the way up. It went crack. I think we're getting off track here, but anyway, like I was saying, we probably should take a break.
Now we will take a break for some advertisements. Please support our sponsors.
We ain't got no sponsors. What are you talking about? This whole damn podcast is brought to you by me, because I'm the fucking sponsor here.
And now, back to the show.
And do you still feel that same way this many years later on when you have those? That's great. That sounds fantastic. My experience of those things has never been from the perspective of not being able to define them. I've been a very analytical person, and so it's almost like all of the analysis and all of the defining of these different things throughout my life has led to much of this sort of like spiritual suffering or the spiritual pain that I have, or my sadness or anger. It's has a lot to do with these defining, as you might have heard before when I was talking, when I went off on my tangent, my soapbox. I have all this sort of like deep-seated anger about things that I I sort of have tried to define. So much of my approach is like, you can see it today when I sort of start talking about each of these different principles. I want to sort of like analyze the language, think about what the language is saying, think about what the implications of that language are and how those might expound greater into our life, or how it might have more profound effect on the way we think or feel about these different things. And so I have to attempt to sort of get away from that type of analysis to find my bliss. So I find great pleasure in like
Overthinking?
no physical activity. Those are the things that's that's what I'm saying. That's my nature. My nature is to overthink and analyze all these things. But like if I can turn that part of my brain off, which is difficult to do, but a lot of times if I can turn that part of my brain off by through some sort of physical labor or work or play or whatever various form I might take my meditation in on my daily basis, then that's where I can find that relief from those things. Sort of like what you were saying, you find relief in definition. I find relief in not thinking about those things. So perhaps that has something to do with our...
Not overthinking about those things. I think thinking about them is perfectly fine. But if you get in that overthinking loop, and that always leads to trouble, overthinking, I find.
Yeah, perseveration is very bad for bliss. I agree.
I think there's a formula, because the universe seems to be a mathematical construct. So I think there's a formula to these.
Whoa, you just made a big statement there. The universe appears to be a mathematical construct? Like the universe itself?
Yeah.
Or our perception of the universe?
The universe itself, it's some kind of biological program. It runs itself. It's set up to run itself in an ever-expanding loop.
Biological program, mathematical construct. I see these as two different ends of a polarity here. I don't see these as the same thing. So let's...
Yeah, you got to look in the middle. Remember.
Okay, where these extremes may meet in the middle?
I don't know where the extremes... It's a mathematical program set up...
A mathematical construct of a biological program.
Set up for biological life, if that makes any sense.
I don't know. I might take umbrage with that, but go ahead. Please continue your point. I didn't mean to interrupt you. So the universe exists as this biological program, which may be defined by some mathematical construct.
Well, it's a mathematical construct designed to support biological life, I guess. No, and I think that these principles, these 7 hermetic principles, are but the whole formula, but a piece of the formula, because I think all esoteric knowledge is pieces of the formula. I don't think anybody will ever have a complete and total grasp of what's truly going on, ever.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't think it's possible. I don't think the human brain can process it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but from a different perspective. I think that the mathematical construct is a definition that humans overlay upon the universe to make us feel better about the fact that we can't understand it all.
Being so small. We're just small little things.
Well, it's like this need to have dominion. I think it's almost like a biological survival strategy for us. I think it goes much deeper than just our needs to govern ourselves or our environment around ourselves, because you see it in everything that we do. You take a human who's naked and afraid, you drop them in the middle of nowhere and give them nothing to survive on, they will eventually either die of hypothermia, or they will take dominion upon their surroundings. They will build shit to live in. They will construct things that they need. They will go out and find food. We are adapters. And I think that this principle of dominion that we want to impose upon the universe around us, it's a survival strategy. This is just my theory. It's just my, and for what that's worth is nothing, because the larger point I'm about to make is that all of these theories that humans make about this reality around them, this is not a slight against the 7 principles of Hermeticism. And it's not a slight against all these struggles for philosophy or struggles to explain the universe, because I think that's just part of our makeup. We need to do that as a form of survival. I don't think there will ever be an answer, because if we find the answer, we will ask the next question, which is,
Right.
so what makes that the answer? Because I think it's in our nature. I think it's a part of us. And people say it's what separates us from other animals. I think that other animals experience this as well. I think it's part of the nature of life as we know it, as a biological function on the planet, using the elements that we use to survive. I think it's so fundamental. And I think it comes from very basic parts of ourselves, which we don't even fully have consciousness over. But at the same time, I think the world is a stage.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that statement is more profound than just simply saying that we're all creating the reality that, or the story that we tell ourselves is reality. I think it's also saying that this is a game that we play. I truly think it is a game that we play. I think all of our concepts of consciousness and higher forms of consciousness and theoretical presentation and all of the extraction that we may say this is all the scientific research or conspiracies or thought or any group knowledge, it's all laid out so that we can better the existence of our progeny. We want them to have a better chance to survive. So we want to tell them the story of the universe so that they will better survive in the universe. But I think that all of that really is just the story we tell ourselves so that we can have the desire to continue and the ability to better survive the people that were before us. But if we took all of that away, all of the knowledge of all of the humans that ever lived, which, as we've talked about before, civilizations come and go, and I believe that that's happened many times in the past, where we've lost some great amount of the knowledge that we all thought that we had. We still survive. You know, life is harder when you don't have smartphones in your pocket.
Is it?
But you can survive if you can make fire and find a rock to hide under and, you know, find some protein to eat and some vitamins to ingest. So my bigger point is just that I agree with you that we'll never know the answer, but I fundamentally disagree with you for the reason for it. It isn't just that we don't have the senses to truly understand the story. I disagree that there is a story to be understood. I think that the story is just, and you know, of course, it's just
That we're making up the story as we go.
We are making up the story. So just accept that.
No, I think we are the story. How about that?
We are a bit of the story.
No, we are the story. We are the originators of the story.
Yeah, we might be the entire story because it's all the story of our imagination. But that's not to say there isn't an objective reality, but I just don't know that we can ever experience objective reality as it is.
Yeah, we're probably fucked as a race. We're dead. It's over. Just stop.
I don't know that. Well, that's a different thing. We're fucked for different reasons, but we're not fucked because we can't understand reality. I mean, it's okay that you don't. Let's think of it this way. If you're a blind man and you walk into a room and everyone's talking about all the things that they can see, and you can't see those things, it doesn't mean that you're completely fucked because you can't see the things that the people can see, because there's all the other things that you can experience. You have all your other senses that you can use.
Right.
And I think that is the limitation of humanity. We have certain senses and certain abilities of consciousness and certain levels of intelligence, and we're social creatures, and we need to feed upon all of the other knowledge of all the other people that have existed in our clan before us or whatever. But that is a very limited sense, and that there are other things that have different senses and they have a different experience. And, you know, their experience of the reality, the objective reality, is different than our experience of reality. It doesn't mean that we're fucked because we can't experience those things or we can't understand those things. It's just simply sort of to say, accept the reality that you have and try to make the best out of what you have. And, you know, the pursuit of further enlightenment, I think, is great. It's a great game to play. Why not play this game? It's the only game in town. All of the other games that you could play, I don't know that they have a better outcome. You know, you have to sort of try to seek some sort of solace, whatever game leads you to that form of solace. I don't know. Tell me how I'm wrong. I'm certain I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. I don't know anything.
I'm sure you are, but I don't know. I don't know how to dissect that enough to tell you where you're wrong. I'm just a foolish guy. I've always considered myself the fool on the hill.
Well, I don't think you're the fool. But I think admitting that you don't have all the answers is a very not foolish thing to do, if that makes sense.
A wise man once said, "I know nothing." An even wiser man literally said, "Nothing."
No one knows his name, though, because he didn't ever say anything.
Yeah,
he didn't introduce himself.
He was quiet all the time. He never said nothing.
After his mother died, no one knew who he was. She was the only one introducing him to people. Because no one wanted to talk to him after...
Yeah, he didn't have anything to say. Why talk to that guy? He was horrible.
They came up and said, "Hey, nice to meet you," and he didn't say anything to them.
Yeah, just a head nod. Well, folks, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming up on the hour mark. So I think we'll call this one. Buck, how do you feel about calling it here? We have gotten way off track. We've talked about many things except for the subject matter that we intended to cover.
You always say that, but I feel like we talked about the subject. I feel like we discussed the subject of polarity at great length. Once again, we find ourselves on the opposite ends of the polarity spectrum of our discussion. So perhaps it's just in line. Yeah. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you once again. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
No problem. Thank you for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the interwebs. You'll find us there once we get there. We had to fire our unpaid intern, social media guy. So he wasn't really doing that good of a job.
Well, who's going to do it now? What are you going to do?
I don't know. I'm going to have to find a teenager, somebody like a 12-year-old who can do this, because social media is beyond me. It's so frustrating. But we'll get all the bugs worked out. We'll get out there. We'll be everywhere. See, why I had to fire the guy was he created our email account and he spelled alchemy wrong, like a jackass. Maybe that's too harsh. Yeah, sorry. But anyway, we'll get it all worked out eventually. I'm going to have to go put out the fire Ted has started in the sound booth. I'll see you guys later.
Be well. Talk to you soon.
We would love to receive your feedback and your questions for advice. Please email us or send us a voicemail. Our address is theblindalchemypodcast@gmail.com. Find, like, review, subscribe, and contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and YouTube at The Blind Alchemy Podcast. All one word. Please subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player. We are available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Anchor.fm/The Blind Alchemy Podcast. Please tell all your friends, enemies, and any strangers to listen to our podcast. This will help us bring joy to everyone. Text-to-speech services were provided by freetts.com and readloud.net. We would like to extend a special thank you to the world's greatest musicians, sound designers, and engineers at Hairline Productions for their help with the composition, performance, editing, production, and recording of both the original music and today's show. Please like their content on SoundCloud.